Hi, my name is Martha. Welcome back to my booktube channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Eddo-Lodge. This is obviously a provocative title and it asks you to find out why the writer is no longer going to talk about race with white people. Obviously, I can understand the sentiment because she answers the question that white people often brush off conversations of race or derail the conversation. And sometimes the struggle of black people specifically is reduced to a struggle that is shared with other people of color when it is actually black people who have been disenfranchised specifically. So she outlines the structural racism that occurs in the United Kingdom, because most of the time when people discuss race in the UK, they tend to frame everything in a US context, and a lot of the discussions on race in the UK are somewhat behind in comparison to America. I was actually surprised, not surprised, that a lot of people did not know even what white privilege means. A lot of the things that people think are buzzwords these days do not even like exist in the lexicon of the dialogue about race in this country and are brushed off as word salads that don't mean anything, which is quite sad and quite unfortunate. So, this book, what it does well is try to outline the structural racism in the UK from historically, from when black people arrived in this country to up to maybe a bit like up to in the modern context, and it outlines the structures of racism in media, policing, housing, and schools, and the journey that a black person can take from birth up to when they start looking for jobs in this country. Also, the writer talks about identity and the kind of the idea of being black and British, of being British in itself, and the way that the UK can kind of strip you of your Britishness at any point, even if you are born in this country, as can be seen by, the Windrush scandal and the things that are currently going on with the British government and foreign nationals. So she kind of gives a background into how people came to this country, and the government went on to um, how the government went on to disenfranchise black people in this country. She also speaks about the race relations that occurred with black people and white people in UK and in places like Liverpool and Manchester, and all the race riots that happened there. And people think that the UK did not have any of those problems like the US did, which it very much did and has up till today. She also talks about identity for mixed children or biracial children, and speaks about how family is also not a barrier to people being racist to you, and also how their biracial identity is erased because once you are insulated in your house, but then when you go out there, you are perceived as black, and that can be quite a shock. And once you become more aware of your blackness per se, is when, you know, when you try to express that to your family, they don't understand in that sense. Also, she talks also about, as I said, she talked about the media and how representation is a big issue in Britain. And going off what I was saying about identity and this idea of Britishness, is also this attack on anything, on any movement towards representation or diversion about any conversation about representation. This movement of anti-immigrant sentiment and the anti-black sentiment about people not wanting to see any different any multicultural representation on screen, and this idea that there's that there's an indigenous group in Britain that should be protected, which is the white people who are scared that they'll be raised by mixed children, and that is so absurd to me. So, following on from that, she also talked about Black women and feminism, and how white feminism tends to erase Black voices, or tends to redirect conversations, or tend to be so defensive that you cannot have a conversation about the intersectionality of being a Black woman. She also talks about this media attack on safe spaces that Black people create for themselves, which is also related to some things that Black people have done in this country. For example, Stormzy and his creation of scholarships for Black people, and how people were so up in arms about it because they felt like it was an erasure of them. Going forth from that, she also speaks about how people kind of evoke names like Martin Luther King in order to ask Black people that they should, come together and have some sort of I have a dream speech basically that white people like to invoke, and how the file, how people love to invoke that quote, but forget that Martin Luther King was not here for moderates, and was also quite militant in his later life, especially when he was in prison. So yeah, so kind of that thing that white people like to like invoke in order as a shield against Black people, as if Black people were a monolith, and also a misunderstanding of Martin Luther King and his politics, and also forgetting that Martin Luther King was killed. The last thing I will mention is she talked about policing in this country and how it specifically works in this country. Obviously, police don't carry guns here, but she talked about how policing is structurally racist just even before when they are trained, and there are people with racist mindsets who are trained as police officers, and obviously that carries over into how they police, and how police have failed Black people in this country, especially when it comes to the Stephen Lawrence case, and how the investigations of the murders of Black people have been, not handled in the best way. She also illustrated cases of police brutality that have occurred in the UK, and which are also swept under the rug and given other names by the police. And yeah, which was something I found very insightful, because every time we talk about police brutality, it's always in an American lens. So it was quite useful to see it from a UK lens, because it is important that things that happen in this country are contextualized in the proper way. Yeah, so the last thing also I would say is that she, just more than saying that she's no longer talking to white people about race, ironically also said that white people need to be anti-racist in order to have these conversations about race. They need to be actively anti-racist and not performatively against racism. And she was kind of saying that, I mean, white people need to get their shit together. Everyone needs to get their shit together, basically. And since she was saying that she is tired of talking about race, which I understand the sentiment, I guess she was probably saying that, Black women and Black people need to have some healing, need to take care of their mental health, because talking about race can be quite exhausting and draining on the psyche, and even probably dangerous for us. And yeah, I think she was just calling for a need to either do the work seriously, or just step back and stay out of people's lane if you don't have anything valuable to say, or if you are stumbling in with an opinion that is unfounded or anything. Maybe that was too harsh. Maybe I'll edit that. But she would, I mean, she was just calling for people to either stay in their lane or be well informed before coming to give opinions on discussions, which I guess can apply for everyone. I think the overarching message for this book is for people to be actively anti-racist, especially if you are in a privileged position, or if you are a white feminist, to also be actively anti-racist in your feminism. I enjoyed this book and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and you should go and read it whether you're a white or black person. I feel like it's very useful for anyone to read. I think it's useful really for anyone who is looking to do anti-racist work and who is looking to listen to people who are marginalized in any context and who need a different perspective as opposed to the American perspective when it comes to discussion of race and racist power structures. So thank you for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.